pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, members of the EDA, we have a very short agenda in front of us for our session. I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And agenda approved. Workshop session today is to talk about 2020 work planning, to continue the conversation we had in our last working session. Dan is gonna kick off our discussion here.
Just a little bit of kind of a work overview, of just kind of EDA's role before we kind of dive back into the work plan here. So I just have a quick presentation on this. And a lot of this came out of, I attended the redevelopment summit last Wednesday, where there was a lot of other community EDA groups represented, a lot of development groups that were there, and kind of getting feedback from what other cities are doing. So I kind of took that back and kind of looked at what we're currently doing here and kind of did a quick needs assessment. Kind of starting out with role. Again, from the conference, like the main driver that we took, the main takeaway from that conference was a lot of other cities view the role of their EDA or the city's role in economic development to be a facilitator in economic development, not necessarily to be the development group that goes out there and actively sits at the table while deals are getting hashed out, more of a facilitator role, looking at how can we connect the development community with what's available within the city. That facilitator role can kind of get further broken down into two different steps. One are action steps, and kind of the second are support roles. So you have an action role and a support role. I would look at action roles as you're actually kind of more or less driving the bus on that one, and the support, you're kind of being in the passenger seat, kind of help facilitate development. So on the action side, that's more the marketing, the market presence, the branding, making sure that the city is well marketed, has a strong market presence, has a strong brand associated with it. So you do some efforts kind of in the branding side of it. It's kind of akin to like Macy's will go out there and brand Macy's as the store, but then they'll have all the different lines within Macy's that are for sale there, kind of the same way within a city. City brands its name, but then all the different parcels for sale are kind of the sub-brands, where it's kind of up to the individual parcel owner to a certain point to kind of make their awareness within that store, which is the city of Forest Lake. On the support side, that's more where you're looking at policies, directed at how and when do you do assistance for a development. Studies, which the EDA has been involved in, like the downtown infrastructure study, a market study, those types of studies that the industry might not take on their own, but we can offer them to businesses looking to locate here, or for existing businesses looking to expand. We can kind of assist with some of the study work that could be feeding into the next one, which is a barrier for expansion. What are those barriers? EDA looking at what are those barriers for expansion within Forest Lake for development, and then what steps can we do to mitigate those or remove those barriers so we're not stuck with a city that's filled with barriers to development. And I think a key component that came away from that conference also was the city's role in being a resource connection. A lot of these developers came in, and some of these cities were saying, we do pooled TIF. Well, the developer at the table was like, I don't keep a list of who does pooled TIF. I don't know what's available out there. So when they contact the city or contact a member of the EDA, they kind of want to know what resources are available, because each city, each municipality has different resources that are available, and how they apply are different in each one. So that resource connection can also expand into local builders, local developers, local land that's for sale. But being that resource connection, a lot of the developers were pretty keyed up, and that's a strong component of a role that the city can play. So I kind of took this back and did just a quick needs assessment, looked at the EDA in general, kind of saying, if we look at kind of what most roles are doing, where are our biggest needs, and how can we meet those needs? And I think we saw it in the last session and the work planning was, there's definitely a need for the city to pursue on the marketing side to improve its position in the marketplace. Those steps are being taken. However, when I go out and meet with, at these conferences, first and foremost, most people don't necessarily know Forest Lake where it is. There's still a little bit of unawareness of what we are. Those that are aware, there's still some headwinds that we're just facing just from, the past year. So we need to kind of work on our branding. We tend to have a little bit of a damaged brand, a little bit. But I think that's something that can be overcome with just kind of a strong marketing push. The Invest in Forest Lake Website Technology Corridor partnerships are strong ways to kind of get over that and improve our market position. On the policy side, I think we're lacking in a policy for how we use incentives. A key reason for this is like if a developer comes in and says, what do you have for incentives? We just say, well, here's kind of a bunch that we have, but we don't have any policy in how they're administered. They'll view that as risk. They don't know if the project's gonna meet TIF requirements, if it's gonna meet abatement requirements, if it's gonna qualify for, you know, this, what all those options are. So if we at least have a policy saying in this situation, here's the criteria for a TIF district establishment, here's the criteria for abatement, here's another incentive that we can get on the docket and have at least baseline criteria for establishment, we tend to help to overcome that risk. So we can say, your project may be outside those norms a little bit and we can adjust it to that, but at least we say that we've thought through how we use incentives within the city here. And I think on the last one is just to continue to foster and build those relationships. I think that's something everybody in this room can do. Think back to your own Rolodex, who do you know in town? You know, if somebody calls in and says, I'm looking for, you know, a realtor, you know, who do we have? You know, I'm looking for a specific parcel. Who do we have? You know, when I see parcels information come in, it's, you know, they have a kind of a general idea of, you know, some of the stuff that's maybe on MinCard, they might be looking for those listings that are the back pocket listings. So just starting to make sure that we were able to connect that market with what's currently within the city. So that's kind of the needs assessment when I look back at where other cities are, kind of seeing what other cities are doing and kind of what we're lacking a little bit in terms of matching up to them. Just some key takeaways. I kind of took it to the next level and kind of looked at, you know, looking at this work plan. I think it's important for us to focus on the basics at this point, is to really drive home, get a really good grasp of the basics of economic development. And when I say that is really have a good, solid policy, have a guiding effort as to, you know, where development would place within the city. That having that great grasp of the basics will then allow us to go to the next level and start doing the small area planning, those larger kind of, you know, those larger projects or kind of those bigger projects. One thing I kind of look at is like, you know, trying to do parcel assembly for a small area plan. Design charrettes are fun to do. I mean, it's kind of good to do the visioning stuff, but for me, that's kind of the icing on the cake. And we haven't baked the cake yet, so we need to focus on baking the cake before we can ice it. So I think that's one of the reasons why I put focusing on the basics as a key takeaway. I think another thing that we need to work on is kind of avoiding stepping out of our lane. And kind of when I say that, I mean kind of shifting from the facilitator role into that developer role. It's pretty easy to kind of shift back and forth. One of the main reasons is that anytime a development happens within a public entity, there are different disclosure rules that apply. One thing was brought up, one of the cities at this conference talked about, they asked the developing group to come in and bring their financials to the table. They wanted to see a full disclosure of where their development was, what their profit margins were gonna be, knowing that they're gonna make money on it, and that's okay. Well, they were able to do that because they had established a pretty strong trust relationship with this developer. And they're kind of saying, you know, a city as a developer, you should look at how ways that you can get them to get this trust level where they're gonna give you their financials. Well, I'm sitting at a table with two developers, and as soon as that panel was over with, they both knew each other and says, we will never, ever give our financials to a city. And I don't blame them, because I mean, if they're trying to figure out what their secret sauce is, they're trying to figure out what their profit margins are, I mean, they don't want that displayed in a public forum. So I think if we're looking at what the EDA can do to facilitate that, we can't necessarily be driving a development bus, asking for financial information if they're not willing to do it. We need to be more in that facilitator role, kind of that, you know, getting them in contact with the resources that can. And I think finally, kind of before we dive into the work plan, is to look at the work plan as more of a roadmap to accomplish the mission statement for the EDA. Since we started working on the work plan, it has been a living document, and it will continue to be a living document. So what's established for 2020, if in 6 months all of a sudden the market completely changes or a project comes forward that kind of takes some momentum or it changes where we need to make momentum, we can make that change. This is more just a roadmap or a guiding document for us to get where we need to go. So I just wanted to kind of provide that brief summary kind of before I dive into the work plan, just to kind of get everybody kind of thinking at this point. Right now, I'd like to pause if anybody has any kind of feedback on that, questions on that, disagreements with where I was with that. I mean, it's all on the table at this point.
I think it's pretty thorough.
Makes solid sense to me.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's helpful to keep this in mind. I think there's interest and motivation in doing a lot of detailed work. I think, a lot of times we're viewed as the connector of, an idea to resources rather than the at-the-table negotiator many times. And I think the reminder of we, as a public body, we have a different set of disclosure requirements and a different operating requirement, and that alone kind of requires us to stay in our lane and make sure we're not being a deal inhibitor when we were in more of a support role, kind of let individual parties work out some of those details.
All right, I'll pull up the work plan here. So if you kind of recall, last workshop, we were, don't tell me how to point now. Okay, so referring back to the paper copy that's in front of you. I don't know why this thing didn't pull
Is it not loading online?
out. I downloaded it to my hard drive to try to avoid this exact situation from happening.
Oh, shoot.
Let's see if it works here. Yeah, it's just not displaying. Sorry about that. I think if you go to page 3, kind of before we go into, I think this is a good starting point. So this is the mission statement for the Forest Lake EDA. This is on every single agenda, so we do have that reminder in every single meeting, kind of like these are the mission statement that was established a while back, and making sure that we keep this in the back of our mind as we develop a work plan, making sure, does this goal help us support, these smaller goals help us support the overall larger goals. And I think another key component of it too is making sure that we also focus on supporting existing businesses. I know we've tended to do a lot of attracting new businesses here, but making sure that we're fostering an environment where we're supporting existing businesses, allowing them to expand as well, is a huge component of, one of the roles that the EDA can play. And if you look at this, creating partnerships, providing a vision for the future of commercial areas. So I mean, it's kind of it's a well thought out mission statement, but just kind of wanted to, again, keep that in back of everybody's mind as to work on the work plan. So the main part, if you go to page 7, on goal number 1, we did spend quite a bit of time working on kind of goal number 1. We did go through all 6. Those goals did. We went through all 5 of the goals and said these are the goals that we all agree that are within. We're okay with the top 5 goals, and we started looking at some of the action stuff and the deliverables. There was quite a bit of discussion last time on the creation of a convention and visitors bureau, so there was a lot of momentum kind of behind that. And a little bit less of a conversation is kind of around the Minnesota real estate, MNCAR, promote and marketing the city as part of goal number 1. And then there was also the conversation regarding kind of the establishment of kind of looking at parcel assembly, which again, I would caution at this point is something that probably is going to come further down the road once you kind of get those basics, to get a bit better grasp of where we are, as a body in general. So I'd kind of put that one just maybe on the side burner for right now and kind of get back and focus on more these action steps as they relate to kind of getting those basics done. So that's where goal number 1 kind of ended up. We just started to touch on goal number 2 at the last meeting, right when the meeting was needing to end. So I think we should probably pick up here on goal number 2, which is.
Pause you for a quick second.
Yep.
Before we leave goal number 1, are there, with the overall goal being support marketing efforts, are there other things we should be doing besides Minnesota Real Estate Journal and MNCAR events? Is that the right spot for us to be kind of putting our efforts, or are there other places where we should be considering as well that with additional budget or additional focus we could broaden that net? I feel like this is what we have been doing, and I'm happy to support what we have been doing. I'm wondering if there's a bigger platform that if we maybe aren't participating in but should. Thoughts, and Chris?
So in terms of advertising, these are kind of So it depends on how you wanna look at it. If your target audience is the development community, like developers and site selectors and commercial realtors, these are the go-to sources.
Perfect.
If your target audience is businesses, probably not. Then you're talking about Twin Cities Business or Minnesota Business Journal, those types of things
Right.
in terms of advertising. But I've always felt like our best connection is with the people that are getting the calls and saying, will you help me find a site? Those are the site selectors and commercial realtors and developers.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we really want to connect with and be on their list, on their short list. So, but there's different ways to look at it. Of course, one thing that we would just assume is that we're automatically keeping the city's economic development website up to date and, you know, working together on joint marketing efforts with the county, that type of thing. But I think if your target audience is the same as what I would envision, the developers, site selectors, those are the right places to connect.
Are there things we could be doing in a different role within, so if that's the right track, are there things we could be doing differently within that track to have a bigger presence? So
Yeah, for sure.
either, stepped up sponsorships, or
Yep.
if it's playing a larger role on content development. I'm not sure what that
Yeah, it's the trade shows.
tier
And,
level looks like.
Dan and I went down to the MinCar Expo where there were probably 500 site selectors and developers at that event. And
Mhm.
those are the people that are, and it's a really informal event. They're walking around just connecting and networking and just having, really good conversations about what's happening in your community. And honestly, we would love to have you come as a partner with us to every one of those things. We do it every year, and have a banner there
Right.
and hand out literature on the 123 acres. Those are easy things to do, and we will work with you on plugging you in whenever we can on those types of events.
I wonder if the action step can be, and the deliverable can be expanded a little bit to give some more definition around what has historically been the level of participation and then planned, and just how do we make that footprint bigger at those events? If that's the right spot to be, how do we make that?
I think it actually comes up later too.
I am coming off of like 200,000 person trade show last week, so I have clear pictures in my head of effective use of conference time and ineffective use of conference time, so.
Mayor, if I could, it also comes up under goal number 3, the last action step, so there maybe as a way to combine the two of them.
I'm gonna jump over to goal 3.
And I see Dan has a program cost in there for $5,000 for trade show booth and marketing materials. So we could almost combine,
For sure.
pull that up into the front one and expand on that.
How do you, I'm sorry.
No, and I think, and I don't mean to imply just throw money at it, but how do we have a notable presence, so that if you're somebody who shows up every year, you're like, oh wow, Forest Lake really showed up this year, how do we
Yeah.
make that a bigger?
And I think Dan alluded to it at the last meeting. We were there with Cottage Grove, and they've got,
Yes.
the mayor and a council member and staff, city staff were there, and
Invite us.
the site selectors came back to that booth year after year after year and said, hey, you guys were here last year,
Yeah.
tell me about what's
Yeah.
going on. And so
Yeah.
you develop those
Yeah.
relationships, and we would love to have you as a partner at our booth, and or have your own booth if you'd like to, and we'll certainly work through that as an option.
I think you have a group that is, and also at the council level, that is willing to show up and roll up their sleeves and.
Yeah, that was, as in terms of that answer to like, what can we do to make sure that we show up next year? I think actually having a booth would actually take us from me just standing with a business card,
Yes.
which is okay, at least I was there. It's a start. However, we have a long way to go up. So, even if I was there with a banner behind me, that's a step in the right direction. But like an actual trade show booth, I think would definitely at least place me or place that person in the right city. Because I was always confused with Washington County, first of all, or Cottage Grove. And then you could see them gonna go, wait a minute, why is Forest Lake here?
Yeah.
In Washington County, here's what we're working on, so.
Could you have a booth at like the Minnesota Manufacturers Convention?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is that the place to attract manufacturers for expansion?
It is. That's a little bit different target audience. And just, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we talked about it last meeting as well about some of the barriers. We're hearing from site selectors who were at the MinCar Expo that the reason that companies aren't expanding right now and relocating to other areas is primarily, well, not only because the cost of construction is so high, but the availability of talent. Companies are so afraid that if they move to a different location, they're gonna lose their existing workers, and good luck trying to find new people. They just aren't, there's not enough people available to fill the jobs right now, so they're staying put. And so it's really a strange time to be marketing when people are just, they're hunkering down and saying, we're just gonna do this here at our existing location and hope to get people to fill the jobs that are growing. It's very seldom that we get calls recently to say a company wants to move from Hudson, Wisconsin into Minnesota because they're gonna lose their workforce if they do. And it's tough to find people right now. It's really tough. That's the number one challenge that companies are experiencing is finding workers.
Well, you've got that bringing in new companies as well as expanding businesses, so it's the same barrier.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting dilemma to have. You know, we've got land available, trying to market that land to companies that are staying where they're at. We're not moving. We're gonna stay put for now. So, and that's a barrier, and one of the things that we can do is to help increase that availability of talent by working with the schools, you know. So those are things that we can work through, but honestly, it's difficult. And right now, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure I don't mean to jump ahead too far here, but that's true with the retail sector too right now, with the brick and mortar retail business changing the way it is because of online shopping. It's tough to get companies to build brick and mortar retail right now. And that's an expansion area we'd love to see more of. It's just not probably the trend that we're gonna see happening.
I think just to kind of dovetail off of that, that falls into kind of goal number 4, the workforce development, or support workforce development. I mean, I think that was key in the last plan, was just to have the workforce summit, is kind of like get the introduction made. We participated in the workforce summit. I still work with the school when they have their quarterly meetings. I still attend those to kind of get connected with the workforce there. They are willing to come out and speak to this group as a whole too, in some point in the early part of next year. But I think that workforce development is key, because when you go to these conferences, that's what they say, we want workforce. So showing some deliverables that we can at least have some talking points on. So on that goal number 4, the action step would be support the efforts of the Forest Lake School District's Career Launch Program. And then kind of the deliverable out of that would be to make the connection with local businesses and high school staff to assist in the development of a talent pipeline for our businesses and students. I know the school right now is always looking for businesses that are willing to at least take the students on so they can get as big of a portfolio as they can. They've asked for, do we know of anybody that in the manufacturing world and in different sectors of the workforce? And I think, again, this is a natural conduit kind of for that to kind of go out and reach out into the actual business community and say, I gotta, having that awareness of the program out there, we can bring those back and form a strong partnership between the EDA and the school on this one.
Shetty, if I could go back and maybe just address the question you asked about the High-Tech Manufacturing Association, for example. One of the things that we should maybe take a look at doing is finding out, we know that about 80% of our residents are driving outside of the city to work every day. If we could find out what skills and talent and education they have and use that as a tool to maybe attract those types of manufacturing companies that can't find workers where they're located, that's an opportunity for us. And we can find, maybe through a survey, I'll use it as an example. If we know that there are arc welders that are living in Forest Lake but driving to Lakeville every day, what a great opportunity for us to bring them back home and work here in the community. So those are things that we'd probably want to flesh that out a little bit, but it would be laser focused on who the folks are that live here that are driving, and use that as a way to recruit companies to fill jobs here.
So like a talent export survey, what is the talent that's leaving Forest Lake every day by sector, skill level?
By trade, right? Yeah, but we could do that, but we'd have to have something to offer those companies. And I like the idea a lot.
I like the idea of the survey, especially with all the construction. My son drives an hour into Minneapolis, an hour back every day. And depending upon the one lane, he's gonna go on for another couple of years. He would love to work locally.
And think of the impact on the local businesses if we had those 80% people staying here in the community every day and shopping here in the community and using services here in the community and the, helping out at the schools and volunteering at the chamber and the Rotary clubs and different events. But now they're gone 8 to 10 hours a day, and it's hard to get them to do that after they're home at night at
Mhm.
7 o'clock at night, and once you're home, you're home. You're not gonna go out and shop or buy services here. You're probably doing that at your lunch hour or on the way back home.
What's the value of their family time for 2
Yeah,
hours
yeah,
that's lost
yep,
every
yep.
day?
So I didn't mean to, sorry, but these are really good questions, and there are ways to address them, I think very strategically.
I like that idea of the talent expert survey. I think that'd be valuable. We see a lot of data around how much talent leaves, and
Yep.
actually just saw that referenced in our bond rating update of how much talent leaves the city. But to see what that skill set is would be interesting, and then how do you market around that?
Exactly.
So anything else on workforce development? I have talent export survey, I have the continue to support the efforts of the career launch, and then partner with local businesses to make sure that we're kind of acting in that facilitator role, is bringing those two groups together.
What are other popular, no, maybe not popular. So this is an easier, not easier, there's a lot to do when unemployment is 5%, 6% in this area. I'm interested in work plan items, what do you do when you're at, almost at 0 net unemployment, right? It's, 2%, and actually of those that are in the workforce, it's almost 0. So so it becomes, the typical things that you would do to try to be connectors, there just isn't a population, so some of those events, there's all sorts of, I was at the Career Force event from Washington County, and there's all sorts of employers, and all of the employers are just talking to each other, because there's no candidate flow, because everyone's
Yeah.
at work.
Yeah.
So good problem to have, but, it's like we need to nurture the next state, knowing that that's not always going to be what's going to happen, and that you still do have kind of talent development. So I'd be interested in what is, given that economic condition, what's a good short-term goal?
An action
recognizing-
step, maybe, or, yeah. So we do know that there are a lot of people that are commuting through Forest Lake to get to the Twin Cities every day as well. So could we find out in the surrounding area how many people drive from North Branch, Pine City, Rush City, Osceola, right down the freeway, every day? And somehow reach out to them and say, you know what, if you're tired of driving an hour every day, we'd like to cut a half an hour off your commute, and there's a lot of opportunities here.
Mhm.
So maybe fleshing that out a little bit and trying to define an action step and some deliverables around that. Because I think honestly, I think you're on the right track. You're gonna see that talent shortage become even bigger in the not too distant future. There's a statistic that I saw in Minnesota that in 5 years, we're expected to have about 300,000 job vacancies that are not getting filled as people retire. That's a big number. And, not all those are here in Forest Lake or Washington County, but a big chunk of them are gonna be. And, how do we attract folks from our surrounding area? We are kind of a regional hub. And to keep them from driving all the way from, I'll just pick a North Branch, from North Branch to Minneapolis every day. Let's try to use that as a way to attract talent and businesses because we've got the land.
Right.
Is there a resource for, I know Fairview employs a lot of immigrant doctors, nurses assistants. Is there a resource where we could attract them to a small town and find skilled workers that have immigrated to the United States and don't have the jobs that they were qualified for in their countries?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good
I'm
question.
kind of thinking on the lines too of our local businesses, right? So right now it's the employee has the reins, right? And it's only gonna, so then for our businesses, to help them put together better employment packages, what can they do to be,
Or
because,
employee engagement programs,
Yes.
right, where
Yeah.
so there's a little bit on the comp and benefit side, but there's a little bit also on just creating a, positive work environment, and
cause that, my
say
guess,
all the time, people leave,
Yeah.
people leave good jobs because of bad managers.
Exactly,
combat that.
exactly.
So, yeah,
So-
employee
so-
engagement tools to
Mhm.
employers,
Mhm.
things, yeah. It can be employee engagement and ultimately it's retention strategies.
Mhm.
You also need people that have post-high school education of some sort. Isn't just college. I mean, it's, they gotta have some, they have some sort of a trade or, and how do we promote that and how do we, I'd love to see a school right here in Forest Lake to deal with that, you know, if the trades or CNC or whatever the case may be, or electronics or computers and, if workforce, unless they have that post-high school education, forget it. That's that 2% we're talking about.
Yes.
That can't, they aren't working, and, so, how do we focus on that too?
Yeah, 66% of the jobs available today don't require a four-year degree.
No, but there has to be some sort of, training.
But it's
involved.
usually like a certificate program or a
Mhm.
three-year degree.
Yeah, right, right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The other thing about that, a lot of those jobs that they require that type of education, there's no debt, these people,
Right.
and they pay well, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Anyways.
That career launch program had a number of the trades represented. and
Right.
They're offering paid education,
Mhm.
you know, come out with a 2-year degree and a career
Yep.
path and no debt.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's an so
But I just don't wanna lose sight
Sam's
of that.
mentioning an
right,
education
right.
component that whether that's working with the schools, and I also think about
Maybe
this is
Century
the
College.
This is the environment of, you know,
Yeah.
tech education and also
Yeah.
all of the, you know, from a technology perspective, all of the coding boot camps out there, there's a lot of online training that's happening, and how do you create awareness of that for our residents?
Mhm.
That is ultimately connecting.
I think if I could just build up that just for 1 second, I think the school is doing a good job of kind of being that forefront and making those connections. If they're going out and trying to find what are the educational components, I mean, if you talk to, is it
Mike Miron.
Miron, who's running that for the school, I mean, he's going out and actually meeting with the employer, so he's got a pretty good pulse of that. So I think in trying to replicate efforts, I mean, I think the EDA as well, I mean, it's like establish where those partnerships can happen. We could just say, somebody comes in and saying, what are you doing for workforce development? Well, the EDA has established a partnership with the school, kind of conduit over there, and like on the employee benefit side too, I think package development is something key for a business to work on, but I think that probably factors better into something that maybe open a business could help with, because
Yeah, right.
there is something that if you come in and you say, I need to know what I'm currently paying my employees, if I'm a private business, I may not want my wage schedules released or where I'm lacking in the market, but something where open a business, you can do it under the guise of privacy, under the umbrella of these numbers don't get released. Again, we're just connecting those, we're serving as the needs connector. So I think keeping that in the back of our minds, so those questions come up, there are resources here, we just facilitate that connection.
I think our work plan should reflect support of those programs, so that we are supporting the schools and that workforce development, their career launch program. Although I get the names between the Washington County program and the schools program mixed up. So supporting both of those programs, and then also whether that education's coming through Washington County Workforce Development, or whether that's coming through, could also be co-sponsorship through programming through the chambers. I think, you know, we should have we're in a support role, but defining what are we doing to be helpful to those organizations, and some, you know, it'd be great to hear from, actually both of those on.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's important to us, what can we do to help?
And I have commitments from both, we're just getting schedules lined up from both Open to Business and from the school's career launch program. They are both gonna be coming in here in the first quarter of 2020. So we'll get to those next level down conversations, so those conversations, those initial invites have been set out, where I'm just trying to get the calendars to one at this point.
Yeah, you're seeing some more and more with their strategic plan at the school there too. I've been privileged to sit on that, for a few meetings, and, there's been some focus toward that too, so it's good.
Is that going to be during like a workshop session with EDA?
Yes.
Is there any chance of expanding that and involving chamber members? To let the businesses have some
chamber members are always welcome.
Yeah, we can get it scheduled out in advance for,
Do some advance notice and welcome, yeah.
I mean, it's an open meeting, so anybody can attend.
I think that's a great idea, invite them to come,
Well, yeah,
because especially I would say a lot of your chamber members might not know anything about open business and how it could, cause sometimes I think, thinking is, I've already been open for 15 years, but why would I go to open,
we do quite a bit with the program, but there's still a long way to go. So, it isn't until they need it that they really listen.
Right.
Well, conversation would be there.
And so I think, that's, and I see, I've been in planning and strategizing for the next year, and education really is where we've talked, Chris and I've talked quite a bit, and doing different things, but it's all about when the need arises, as a business
Connecting.
owner, it isn't until.
I think something the city can do a better job of is promoting, telling the stories, so that, because people, to your point, if you've been in business for 10 years, you may think, I don't need it, I'm not a startup.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're getting ready to do what's next, whether that's transition, or open another location, or negotiating a new commercial lease, or whatever
Or
it is.
just open their minds to the fact that they
Yes.
could sit down and talk to somebody that might give them some ideas.
Right, yeah, and so I think telling those stories and kind of,
Bottom line, it's another time and location for them to have the opportunity, because we offer it in a variety of ways, but I think, right,
Yep.
Chris, every
Yeah.
opportunity that we can to
Yep.
bring that information forth is a good thing.
Yep.
So, yep.
And the school will be part of that, the school program?
Yeah, the director, or Michael, I've emailed Mike and asked him to come speak, and he's just looking for some dates that will work out, so he said he's willing to come out, and same with Tyler from Open to Business, they both said they are willing to put it on their calendar, we just gotta make sure that I give them the EDA calendar for next year, and we get dates that work for everybody.
That's another thing that I think if local businesses knew about that, there's some smaller businesses or even bigger ones that I wanna jump in there and look at mentorship or getting involved.
Kind of jumping around a little bit, but kind of going back to goal number 2, it's on page 7, promote downtown revitalization. The first action step on this one is the establishment and oversee a downtown committee. Had kind of a scoping on that a while back, just on what would a downtown committee look like, what were some of the activities that a downtown committee would work on. Kind of setting a timeline to that one, and I have the wrong year there, I'm still in 2019, but it has a deliverable in first quarter of 19 would be the establishment of the actual committee, get the structure set up, get the meeting time set up. And then moving forward, that group would then meet regularly to kind of work on issues surrounded by downtown. Have the program costs for this one estimated at $15,000. That'd be allowing for access to consultant work, utilizing the CDA's grant program match, and then to continue on with some of the beautification efforts that were started this past year. So it's kind of a little bit of a catch-all at this point, but that $15,000 would be leveraged pretty extensively using funds from Washington County as well. So could see a lot of good activity come out of that. So that'd be kind of the first step for downtown revitalization. Second one is one that's been on there for a number of years, is the continuation of the business incentive program, which provides for abatements of up to $5,000, reduced permit fees, expedited building turnaround time for downtown commercial properties. One thing I see it sitting here, one thing that I have talked to building about is they would like just a review of that 10-day notification window. They're willing to expedite the permits, but if we all of a sudden have a slam of business permits come in, or the building review takes longer than 10 days, they just don't want to be held on to that time frame. But they're still willing to expedite the permit, but they just don't want to have somebody come in on day 11 saying, oh, by the way, my permit was due in 10 days out, and we're waiting on clearance information from the builder.
Yeah, they can't be held, right.
Right, and that's just, I mean, it's a small, kind of a nuanced deal there, but it would just kind of help to make that program a little bit more easy to administer.
I think if we're gonna, can I jump in on that? I think if we're gonna do that, I think we should, I think we wanna incentivize some sort of a fast track, and if fast track isn't illustrated by 10 days, we should talk about what does that look like. So, whatever we can do to describe a fast track scenario, I think is probably even a better marketing term than the timeline turnaround?
No, I agree, and the reason why the 10-day, I think it was originally kind of an arbitrary number, and we had a couple of challenges with like if there's a vacation in there, if there's a holiday in there, I mean, it's just, but I think you're right, fast tracking is saying you get expedited, fast track permitting, priority preferential permitting, something which just says that you rise to the top of the list, but, you know, I mean, we're still, if there's comments that we have to get back from the builder on, we can easily sometimes expand that 10-day window, but we're still expediting as quickly as we can at the staff side, so we can work on some language to clarify that. We've historically done about 1 to 2 abatements a year for that program. So I just put a program cost in there of approximately $5,000. I think it's gonna be depending upon what the activity level is downtown. I do get some calls from residents, from business owners downtown, building owners that wanna do some renovation work. When they find out that it's exterior renovation work and not interior, that tends to be a barrier, because again, the goal of this program initially was to improve the aesthetics of downtown, was to get those buildings refaced. And they also, I mean, there's been a couple of them that have actually also commented on just the amount of investment as being a barrier. For the full 5,000, you need to do, I believe it's $40,000 worth of work. So they're, you know, I mean, we've never talked about, is there a slide, if we wanna do a sliding scale on that one, but it was, at first it was just 5,000 for 40. But there have been a few smaller renovation projects that have happened that, you know, have asked for it, when I tell them the amounts, they,
So, that has me thinking, I wonder, so if the goal is downtown revitalization, I get that we're overall looking at an exterior aesthetic, but if we really wanna support the business, and if there's businesses that would be making more investment in their business overall, which creates a better user experience for everybody downtown, I wonder if we remove the requirement or define something that we would consider appealing for an internal. I mean, if you're gonna make an internal storefront a better shopping experience or a better restaurant experience, do we
Yeah.
care if it's exterior or interior?
That's right, I mean, if it's just facade, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
You know, you gotta have the guts of the thing too, so.
But we talked about not normal maintenance like HVAC and roofs and all that, right? That wouldn't,
Right.
is that what a lot of the, some of the requests coming in that way?
some of that way, some of wanna just kinda do like, I'm taking a building and I'm just updating the interior of it, you know, putting a coat of paint in an HVAC system, you know, and, you know, to be fair, I mean, we don't get inundated with calls in this program, we're not sitting there with a call log of 50 of them, it's, you know, a handful.
But I
Well, I
can see
still
where.
don't think that it's very well
Where you go.
known.
There are a few that know of it. I mean, when I get a new developer comes in, that's the first question they ask, and then, you know, they say, here's our incentive program, and so, I mean, if there's somebody looking to purchase a property, they are aware of this program.
Yeah, but we're talking about existing business owners too, and,
Correct.
you know, like, I hope the guy from, that bought the theater building in the Laker was offered that incentive.
He was, yeah, that information was passed.
Um, But then there are the ones that have been around forever that, you know, I don't know if they know about it or not.
Just a real quick question, if they're a renter, and they're looking at aid for a build-out, that the building owner won't pay for it, would they qualify if they're a renter?
Not in this
Yeah,
program.
okay.
Internally.
No.
If we did it for interim, because that might be a real thing.
I mean, this whole bill, I mean, is there a way to define that in a way that we would want to support it? I mean, you are, it all comes out of the same pool of money at some spot. It's, either you're assisting a business or you're not, and whether it's an exterior upgrade or an interior upgrade, you are, in concept, assisting. I wonder if there's a way to define it that it's still supporting downtown business, in the long-term interest of the city.
Could open
Maybe taking away some of the barrier for exterior improvement.
the interior only if they participate in the exterior, or
Right,
have it at a lower level,
right.
incentive to do more and more.
I think it's,
Cause the exterior was discussed so much in the past years just because of what actual
Right.
aesthetics are today.
Right.
And that, try to improve that was their goal back in the day.
But then if you look at like what's the building with the green doors in, the exterior does not need to be classed up, but they need some help on the inside. And if, you can have somebody do a build out. I think the bank owns the building now, so they don't need incentive to get a tax rebate, but to incentivize somehow so they could fill it up. And that totally would have no exterior, anything except signage.
That's a good example of one that
Can I just, from a caveat perspective, just throw it out for discussion purposes, you gotta make sure that these public dollars are used for a public purpose. So you'd have to be really careful and create a policy that is real clear, reviewed by the attorney to make sure that you're using these dollars appropriately, so.
Well, you're increasing the tax base of businesses.
You know, maybe, but if you're replacing carpeting or in cabinets and stuff like that, maybe not. It's, so you'd have to be sure to make, and I'm just,
that there's
I don't wanna
value
throw water on it, I just
created.
wanna say be careful, yeah.
But on the flip side, if somebody's investing in new carpet and new cabinets, they're gonna stay in business, they're
Yeah.
planning on staying in town and in business,
Yeah.
which is, in the long run, is good for the city, but yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sure
but we'll
there's
just have to make sure
fine
we're
line.
developing policies around, and make sure it's applied evenly and appropriately.
And I think that, I think that if you look at the incentive program, the way it's currently drafted, I think the policy could use a little bit more meat on how we actually administer it. It's a little bit,
It
it's
was
a few
pretty
page
vague.
document right now, it's pretty open to interpretation, it's kind of like a staff member makes the interpretation, if the business doesn't agree with it, they appeal. I think, so maybe changing this action step from, leave it as supported right now, but we put a second part of that where we actually review the existing one and then update it to allow for the possibility of internal, or if we wanna do a stepped up, or kind of make it more robust, kind of a more built-out policy.
Sounds like a good workshop item.
Yeah, and so, taking a look at what other cities do,
Correct.
I'm always all about that,
Mhm.
not recreating the wheel.
Yep.
I think that would be really important to know what's Lino doing, what's Hugo doing, what's.
Yeah.
Hardin
I
doing.
just have a question that I just don't know. What do you identify as downtown?
Yeah,
Just for
for
my own
purpose,
self?
do we define
because
it in?
It
We
is.
say downtown all the
Too.
time and I don't really know.
MU1, MU2 zoning districts for that
That
particular.
doesn't mean anything to me, so what does that
So
mean?
you have to look at the zoning.
You'd look at the
Oh,
zoning map,
okay.
and then there's a zoning map,
She
so
needs
it
a
has.
line
I would
drawn.
have to-
There's, yeah, pull the city zoning map, so we define it as MU1, MU2, however, as always been stated, those aren't necessarily hard and fast. If an application comes in that's border, adjacent, we wanted to make sure it was kind of defined in that particular region. It's not something, if something came in from, southwest Forest Lake, we probably would not work on that one, but if it's adjacent to MU1, MU2 zoning districts, that's on the map.
So in general, all of Lake, all of Broadway,
Correct.
the commercial districts of Lake and Broadway?
On Broadway up to kind of where all like the big national chains kind of.
Let me get to the freeway, okay.
Yeah, we wanted to try to get it, so we
Yeah.
weren't offering target $5,000. We wanted to kind of cater this more towards the small business community, not necessarily the national brands at that
So
point.
up Broadway, like to, Norman Quacks,
Yeah, actually, I think a little bit past, I think it's Broadway Heating and Air, I think that's further,
Broadway's this way.
the heating and air conditioning place, like out to where like,
That's between six and
He's
seven.
closer
Is
to,
it?
Yeah, I think he's
Mhm.
closer.
closer to Lake.
Norman
Maybe.
Quacks is west of the signal.
Yeah, Yep.
oh, you're right. Yeah,
It is.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's like right in there.
So yeah, that's
But
roughly
okay.
generally, yeah, you can see it on the map.
Other thoughts around promoting downtown revitalization?
I had a question, because there's a survey, right, going on right now for downtown? No? Okay, a couple meetings back, or a while back, you were talking about the University of Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, the study, that's downtown, yeah. They're doing a market
That's-
trade area analysis for the downtown area.
And they're actively working on that?
The report's due back in December, right?
Yeah, I
I
should get
know
that
they
in
are,
like 2
because
weeks.
I've talked to
Christmas
people that have heard
gift
from
was,
them, so will that information
Christmas
play
gift, did you
into
think?
this then?
Correct, yeah, that's actually something, I didn't put it in this level, that was one of the things I kind of slotted in for the downtown committee. If they're gonna focus on downtown, that's a good kind of market study for them to
Mm-hmm.
That's
get
a-
some good jumping off point for that committee.
We teed up a number of things for that group to work on, that feedback from that being one, feedback being the Highway 61 Downtown Improvement District work. There was a previous downtown working group, and it was kind of the results of that previous working session. And we'd also teed up the result of the Urban Land Institute joint workshop that we had in the first quarter. Kind of mission one for that downtown group is to kind of review everything that's been done already, and how do we take advantage of that information and make sure we're not reinventing the wheel and build off of what's already established.
I have one other question in regards to this area. How does, I've had conversations with Rick, Chief of Police Rick, about the speed limit, and I understand that's a county issue, but does that play a role in this conversation as well for this group or not?
61, I don't think that's a Ryan question.
What was the question? Speed
Well,
limit
the
on
speed
Broadway?
limit, yeah, the speed limit on Lake.
Right,
That would be MinDOT, because they're the road authority.
yeah, it's not county.
If there ever is a request to look at changing it, you would have to request a speed study through MinDOT. MinDOT then would conduct a speed study, but even though you go through that process, you might increase the speed limit. It's not always a given, you're gonna decrease it. So, lots of times, what we would do is deploy our own police and kinda get some radar on our local roads when we go through this process before we introduce ourselves to that situation. Since August, early August, local road authority stuff has changed, but not MinDOT's or county or township.
So who did the North Shore?
Council,
Okay.
So before we did that,
if you liked
We
it, council
deployed-
did it, if you.
we deployed the
Well,
piece,
it's-
the
it's a
police to
struggle.
get,
I'm
knowing
set
what
by my cruise control.
our percentile of speed was out there before we chanced it.
You did.
We did it on Fenway too, but if we did go through that route, we would've increased the speed limit on Fenway
Really?
previously.
Well, it gets complicated downtown now because we have all those residents.
It does,
And-
very much.
That's, to me, it's still prohibitive. I would never walk across the street from my building across to the other side because,
Especially because you're coming in from the north.
That's been a
So I
complaint,
think, so I think that's a, you know, back to Dan's framework of barriers or what are inhibitors to development or inhibitors to quality of life.
That's a good one.
I'm not sure I'm not sure it tips the point to economic development, but certainly downtown revitalization and part of creating a livable, walkable downtown. I think that
Well, and
solidly belongs there.
and then you look at the sign ordinance and how, if I'm driving and I'm trying to read the signs based on the sign ordinance to where these businesses are located, I mean, all of those things play a role
Yes,
because of that.
yes,
It's just different there.
yes.
Especially when you're talking, I don't know if it's MU1 or MU2, but if you go from, the end of the block to the opposite end of the block on Lake, from the roundabout, to the, down to, the ice cream store. That's the complicated area, I think. Anyway, thank you for
Appreciate
answering
that.
my questions.
Yes. Sign ordinance,
It's part of that downtown theme
it's
discussion.
gonna come up,
Mhm.
for sure.
And sign ordinance enforcement has come up as well, if I were there.
Usually the other side of the coin, right?
Sign ordinances take a long time. I worked on them years ago and it was just a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah.
Sense.
All the
And-
stuff that comes up on
But,
it.
yeah, but I think just taking a look at the sign ordinance
Mhm.
as it is based on what you came up with years ago.
Mhm, mhm.
And just saying, okay, that's good. It's good, but then really taking a look at how it's being used, enforced.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, I hate to bring that up, but
If it
has
needs
to be
work, we
reviewed.
need to work
it
it.
needs work.
It
Yeah,
needs to
that's
be
all there's to it.
reviewed.
Because there's so many entities involved there, between the planning commission and the council and the businesses and
Oh, I
try to come up with the best, but then as soon as you did, you picked out something, then there would be a reason why you can't do it that way, you know? It was just, oof.
Mhm. But it is probably the number one or two concern for business owners.
Yeah. The other issue with these downtown businesses, is there any, I don't wanna get shot or thrown out of the room, but is there any incentive or thought about low-interest loans to the businesses from the city?
So does Open to Business offer pathways for some of those avenues?
They do.
And I'm not trying to just deflect to the county. I just
Nope,
wanna
that's
make
good. It's all
sure I
good.
understand
We-
what's already available.
Yeah, we would encourage more participation in the Open to Business program. The one thing about Open to Business is it's not necessarily a low-interest loan. Our goal is not to replace the banks. We want the bank to be in first. And then if a bank can't go all the way to the starting line, we want to come in and fill that gap to get the
Okay.
business started or
Yeah,
expand.
Yeah, so my question is it being done? And
It's not right
and-
now, but
yeah.
if you chose to, and the county, just so you know, is looking at that as well. You could create a revolving loan fund for business purposes, for business expansions, that type of thing, for job creation, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And we are looking at that at the county level. There's actually, and Dan will learn about this on December 6th, and Patrick as well, at the next ED work group at the county. We've got a proposal to capitalize a revolving loan fund at the county level to do three things. So one would be business expansion, one would be dilapidated building demolition, and the other would be commercial rehab.
So
So-
how much is a barrier is access to funds for,
It's,
is that?
It's not the primary barrier.
Some sectors, there's also there's an excess amount of funds available, there's just not enough businesses that are applying for it that are qualified, so
yeah,
what's,
it's not the primary barrier, but it is a barrier. Access to capital, that's usually subordinated, which we would be, we'll come in behind the bank. It's hard to fund. Most banks want a first position or
Yep, yep.
personal guarantees and all that
about that.
stuff. We probably wouldn't do that because we're coming at it from a different approach. Our approach would be, we wanna make the communities better, and so we'll take a subordinated position. And so, there is no guarantee that the funding will be in place, but we're developing the policies and the goals and action steps right now to put that in place, probably starting as early as 2021. But the city certainly could do that as well. And honestly, it would really help us if the city would match our money, so it wasn't just the
so
county.
you're not out alone?
If we come in for half, you come in for half, let's just do what we can, for a loan program. So that is certainly something to look at, and a lot of communities do offer that.
And I think that dovetails nicely in the kind of, if you look at goal 5, we talked in the first one, kind of that incentive program, that whole package of incentives. The low interest loan is something that I've heard businesses, not only here but in other communities, also look for revolving loan fund, low interest loans to help do that gap financing. And if we at least evaluate that, have that in the toolbox, saying, well, here's what you need to qualify for it versus, low interest loans are out there, go try to find them. If we can say, here's what you need, I think that's a very helpful thing for businesses looking to expand or to fill. They may get a bank that gives them 80% qualification or 80% of what they need. We've found the last 20%, but I think that dovetails right in that identify the barriers portion of it. And if we develop a full policy of all of the different tools that we have to do all that, that's one that we can definitely slide in and get some work behind. How do we implement that?
Do you have does Washington County have other cities that are co-participating in that gap participation?
It doesn't exist yet, but if we
Oh,
do,
okay.
if we do create it, it would be available in 2021, but right now, we don't, the county does not have a revolving loan fund.
Got it.
That's honestly why we started the Open to Business program, because we wanted to be able to help these entrepreneurs get started and grow. And we thought, from the county's perspective, we've got 18,000 non-employer businesses in the county, that those are owner-operators for the most part. And we thought if we could help them grow, and if each one of them would just add one employee, that's 18,000 new jobs in the county. So we wanted to help grow our small businesses. They're already here, they're gonna stay here, let's help them grow here. And that's a good way to do it. So the Open to Business program was how we got it started. We're hoping to take it to the next level and actually capitalize a revolving loan fund. Probably, the request might go into the county for consideration for funding next July for the following year. for budget year 2021.
So what is the next step as far as forming this downtown team?
Put pencil to paper and actually start getting the work plan on paper, and I think that all gets brought back in early 2020. I keep thinking it's 2019 next year. But then we get brought back early 2020, then assign who's, to pick who's gonna be on there, and then, portions of that, I think it's critical to at least get the glance of what the Humphrey Institute study comes back as, to make sure that is there enough there? Combine that with the 61 study, all those study materials, take a look at that, and then develop some, a kind of a roadmap for here's the background information, here's how we can use it, get some input, collect on that, but that's coming back in 2020.
Which is like tomorrow.
It is.
It's very close.
But now, do we draw from the pool of people that are already kind of involved with the city, or are we gonna look for people that are
It's an outside
just on
eyes.
the edge, or, are out there, they're business-minded, or whatever the case may be, that aren't necessarily on the planning commission, or the park board, or the EDA, and all that kind of stuff?
I think it's important to have people, in my opinion, from the downtown business community on board. I think you don't want these decisions to happen in a vacuum, where all of a sudden it's kind of like, hey, we decide that you think this is the best thing that you need, and then all of a sudden it doesn't even meet at all what their challenges
Right.
are, so I think having that business representation is critical.
I would agree with that.
So I think between the feedback we got from when EDA workshop this, and then the feedback we got at council,
Mhm.
on number of people, kind of scope of work, I think then you start to, okay, what are the different types of roles, and starting to put
Oh, of
names
course,
to roles.
yeah.
I think all that comes back to this group for next round of workshop early January, and then council reviews to approve. But to Dan's point, I do think it's helpful to have that Humphrey Institute study back, and just make sure that directionally we're.
Yeah, well, I think that should guide that
When is that completed, did you say in December?
December maybe.
It should be like mid-December.
And that's when they finish their surveying and then they pool their
No, they're
information?
No, they're done.
Oh, they're
So
done?
the class is done. in
Okay, it's
mid-
not very often we have like a final deadline.
Right.
Like
No,
this, never
that's
at work, but
It's
it's kind of helpful when the class, they all
Yeah.
move on to new classes, so it has to be done.
Yep.
Unless they're taking it
Their grade
incomplete.
depends on it.
Right.
Yeah, so I'll get that hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then from there, review it, and then start working on the first sort of penciled in work plan jumping off point for the downtown committee.
I think we also should let that committee percolate a little bit on, get their feet wet, understand, there's like a ramp up period. We set some general guidelines, they come back with a more detailed work plan, and there's some collaboration, and I think it's a working document with moving goals as it gets kicked off.
Is that something, like, I have a couple people in mind, is that something I could suggest participants?
Yeah, you could send recommendations, Dan and I, for sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we are nearing the end of our scheduled time. We walked through in a fair amount of detail goal 2. We had skipped ahead to goal 4. We have not talked in great depth about goal 3 related to actively promoting city-owned land and identifying and removing barriers to development. We talked a little bit about some of that as part of the other discussion today. For interest of time and to make sure we're giving this kind of enough work, what are your thoughts on, we have another regularly scheduled meeting at 5:30 on December 11th, is that right?
Ninth.
December
Ninth.
9th
Yeah.
is our regularly scheduled meeting. We are time bound by a council meeting at 6:30. We have an annual truth and taxation hearing that starts at 6:30 that evening. But we could do another hour session to wrap up those 2 items and any other things that, Dan, if you could get an updated version of this out, maybe even like before the next packet, you could just updated notes, review through, and let's do a deeper dive on those 2 goals, and then just an overall refresh. That would wrap up unless there was any other scheduled work coming before us before the end of the year.
I think it'd probably be a combination workshop regular meeting, cause there's a couple of year end, just get the minutes cleared out for the
Okay.
year and some other
Okay.
stuff. I mean, so probably what we did before, meet in council chambers, adjourn and be here for the workshop session.
And then we don't have another scheduled meeting, well, the official calendar may also, no, we don't have a meeting on the 23rd.
Nope.
I don't think even the official calendar, so our last official meeting would be December 9th for the year. December, Christmas gift arrives with the Humphrey Institute study, and then regroup in January. Anything else we should
So
consider?
can I just real quick go
Yeah,
back to
please.
the loan and the different incentives? I think if 40,000, if you're here and that's an issue, I think we should address that sooner than later and potentially lower that number. And as far as inside and doing build outs, I would be fine with that, but it is kind of a slippery slope as to what
It
is qualifies and what doesn't. And to your point, Chris, about the public part of it being a, positive or that goes to it. So I don't know what that number would be, or if it is a sliding type situation, scale type, but that, I think.
Well, I think that it could be a good long discussion to put some parameters around things.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, just kind of off the cuff, but to that point, I think it might be beneficial to kind of take these one at a time. So you slow, for not just all of a sudden having to dive into the revolving loan fund, the downtown incentive program, the TIP. Kind of take them one at a time to kind of build that momentum behind us so we can definitely start out. We have one in place right now. Maybe start with a retooling of that early first quarter of 2020. And again, realizing too, this group meets, twice a month, and there's so much time is devoted to us. We want to make sure that we give everything the right amount of time for the right amount of discussion behind it as well. So I'll start laying out when those happen.
I think also what we should do at our next meeting is if everybody can kind of prioritize top focus, because everybody in the room is gonna have their favorites, but I wanna make sure that we were giving staff direction let's nail these top three and have focus on these top three first, or whatever that number is, recognizing my favorite might be number 8, and I might just have to be patient for the first half of the year. But let's try to get some
Yeah.
consensus around prioritization. Otherwise, we're gonna shotgun it and not feel like we've accomplished what we wanna accomplish. All right, anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second. I'll second.
All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
And we're adjourned.